Today on the Unafraid Show, we got a special guest. We got a man coming from the YouTube verse as well, Mr. Big Ten Ted, who you can find. Make sure you go over to his channel. Dope stuff on the Big Ten and college football all over the place. Big Ten Ted, welcome to the show, man.
Here we are. It is great. It is great to be here with you, my man. I'm ready to talk some Big Ten football from coast to coast today.
Yeah, so the spring balls are going on and everybody's excited about the future of their team, but I was thinking there are some teams that they got some scary times ahead, and one of those teams that has some unsurety at the quarterback position, even though some of their fans feel like it, is Michigan. So you're like,
Sure.
you got Mikey Keene, you got the touted freshman Bryce Underwood, and there's a faction of people that believe that, oh, this is Bryce Underwood's to lose. He's got to be the day one starter. Look what they paid him. And that don't work in the NFL, so it damn sure shouldn't work in college football just because you paid him or drafted him early that you got to put him on the field.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and that is a relationship that I think obviously we're just a couple of years in with the whole financial piece here in college football, but this is a very interesting situation because here's Mikey Keene is a good quarterback. You watch his film, he can certainly plug into Michigan. He's certainly going to be a significant upgrade over what they had last season, and this is a very interesting thing to me. A lot of people, like you said out there, are saying, hey, Bryce Underwood, the day one starter. And they're just glancing over what Mikey Keene has done in his career over at Fresno State. Ask Michigan. They played Fresno State last year, and Fresno State pushed back on him a good amount. And Mikey Keene played a pretty good football game against that Michigan defense on the road there in Ann Arbor. So
Yep.
this is certainly one of the big battles, I think, at quarterback in the Big Ten this season. And if you look at Michigan's schedule, this is a playoff type of schedule. And I think with the upgrade at quarterback, no matter who it is, like this could be a playoff team possibly. So I think that possibly goes into if Mikey Keene starts the season, how much momentum can he build up if he gets victory after victory after
Yep.
victory and Bryce
Well,
Underwood is sitting
especially
there?
that Oklahoma game, right? If he
Right.
beats
Yeah.
Oklahoma and things are going well, they, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Central Michigan, and then as you get into Big Ten play, right, that's going to be hard to pull him out. And here's the thing, I do think that Michigan fans need to be realistic that whatever is going to be best for Bryce Underwood is exactly what they need to do. That
Right.
obviously winning football games is important, but at the end of the day, fans really ain't the ones that are shelling out that NIL money. So when we get to saying that, oh, we paid him, nah, we ain't really pay him. You know what I mean? It's a handful of boosters who can say that are like, yo, we paid him, he needs to be on the field. But if putting him on the Arch Manning plan is the best,
Mm.
if you're gonna do this to Arch Manning, why can't you do this to Bryce Underwood?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Here's the thing about freshman quarterbacks that I tend to believe, like Dylan Raiola, I think is a great example. You throw him out there now. Michigan, I think, is going to be working with a little bit more than Nebraska was certainly last year, so that has something to go into it as well. But now at this top level of college football in the Big Ten or the SEC, it's tough to throw a guy in as a freshman right now. There's been some whisperings out of Southern California. They got a 5-star in Husan Longstreet that's going to be a freshman that everybody's excited about. But man, I think the Arch Manning plan, as you mentioned it, I think is a great plan certainly. And even you got to rewind a little bit back to Michigan. JJ McCarthy was a 5-star, remember, when he was coming
Yes.
out of high school, and he kind of played in that Michigan played him in packages. Remember, it's crazy to think about it now where JJ McCarthy is going to be the starting quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, and Cade McNamara, who is above him, I think is at something like East Tennessee State
Yes.
or something right now.
Yes.
It's insane to really think about that, considering how that 2021 team how that worked out, and then how it worked out certainly down the road with them eventually winning a national title. But I think spring ball is going to go a long way for this coaching staff, for the a new offensive coordinator coming in there, Chip Lindsey, to really get an eyes on where Bryce is in his maturation. Now, of course, it's a lot of install, it's a lot of those kinds of things to be able to get to know the system a little bit during spring ball. So you can't really determine everything, 100% of stuff during the spring as well. But I think they're going to start to get a gauge on where exactly Bryce is. But Bryce brings a lot of athleticism. I could very well see Mikey Keene does a little bit too, but I could see some package stuff for Bryce Underwood to kind
Yeah.
of get them off balance. Arch Manning is a great example. I think we could see possibly something similar.
Dude, you know what I was thinking? I was like, I thought that Sharon Moore did a great job of answering all the questions last year.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah.
obviously, Jim Harbaugh leaves, they got allegations, they got scandals, they got everything else.
Sure.
And part of the coaching staff leaves. So many players go to the NFL, and he put together a competent football roster, a competent football team with with the inability to throw the ball at a high level. And the cool part is with getting Bryce Underwood, with changing the OC, it's like he doesn't want to play run and punt football anymore. He wants to play good defense, obviously, because that's the Michigan
Mm-hmm.
way. But also at the same time, be able to get off the struggle bus offensively, which I believe is going to put Michigan in a spot to just not just win a big game here or there in the Big Ten, but actually be a force kind of going forward in that what looks right now to be a 3-4 headed monster with Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think last year is about as bad as it's going to get for Michigan because I think this year, especially with this recruiting cycle, we were just talking about Bryce Underwood. Michigan landed the number 6 class in the country. This was really the turning point where
Yeah.
people are the donors and the boosters saying, "Yeah, we're going to push a ton of money into this thing." I mean, like it's Michigan. There's alumni all over this
Yep.
country that have a ton of money. Obviously, that that was known with the Bryce Underwood recruitment and some of the other guys that they brought in certainly right now. And the offense that you mentioned, of course, Chip Lindsey coming in from North Carolina is something that interests me a little bit. He's got maybe a little bit more of he runs a little bit more of some spread concepts, some more
Yep.
open concepts that they're maybe used to in that smash mentality that they talk about at Michigan. But personally, I love the combination. I love the combination with Chip, what he can do kind of in the passing game, and what Sharon Moore, of course, former offensive coordinator and offensive line coach, he's certainly a maestro in the run game as well. So I think that's a really good balance for this offense to be even more balanced than maybe what it was when Harbaugh was head coach and Sharon Moore was the offensive coordinator in there as well. So I think there's good things certainly ahead for in Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's a team that I'm really expecting to take a multiple win jump up this year.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. 100%. Because last year they finished 8-5, and I think we're going to be looking at a 10-win season,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
minimum 9-win season, and possibly 10 or better. With you look at who's not on the schedule. Um, I'm looking at the situation over at Ohio State, and
Mm-hmm.
it's weird, right? Because on one hand, we just said so many positive things about Michigan, and then when I've been talking about Ohio State fans have been a little bit upset because it feels like I'm down on them. But I'm like, you're still looking at a 10 or 11 win team. It just doesn't feel like it's gonna be a potential national championship again. And fans are so caught up in ring culture that they can't just say, okay, we just won a national championship. We lost our offensive coordinator, our defensive coordinator, our quarterback, 2 running
Yeah.
backs, uh, d- defensive ends. Like we've lost so much actual like production, and we're expecting to win a national championship again. Oh no, you're doubting us. You're talking down about us. You hate Ohio State. No, I just understand that putting a competent product out there every single year it is like more important than winning a national championship every single year because it's literally not even possible.
Yeah, Ohio State is a very interesting case study with kind of the points that you certainly brought up there as well. Like it is going to be really tough to really recreate something like an Alabama or other dynasties throughout college football in today's modern age,
Facts.
where you can't over recruit. You cannot stockpile 5 stars for 2 years and have them sit or redshirt or whatever, and then they play 3 years from now. If a kid doesn't play and he gets a money offer to go $2 million, $3 million, whatever, maybe more, to go start somewhere else, he's going to do that. It's
Yep.
hard to be able to lose a ton of guys and then to be able to still be at that national championship type of level for them. But here's when I think about Ohio State, out of all the guys they lost, I'm like, still got Jeremiah Smith, still got
Ooh.
Caleb Downs. That's still
Yeah,
that's still going to be a nasty football team. I don't think there's any question about that.
for
I actually
sure.
think Ohio State, with Brian Hartline, of course, the former receivers coach, coming in to be the OC, and I've talked
That's
about
good.
this. I think Ohio State is going to be more like maybe their C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields. They're going to, I think, push the ball down the field a little bit more. You talk about those two running backs they lost. They bring in a transfer from West Virginia, C.J. Donaldson. I think it's going to be more of a compliment this year. They say a lot of great things coming out of Columbus about Julian Sayin, the 5-star in there as well. So I think this is going to be an offense that's really going to sling the football around. I think defense outside of Caleb Downs, like that's going to be a question mark where some of
For
these
sure.
other guys really plug in for the Jack Sawyers
Yeah,
and the JT
you're
teams.
not gonna have the number one defense in the country last year and replace
Right.
all of those players and the OC
Yeah.
and the DC and be the number one defense in the country. Might you have a top 15 defense? Probably. But
Yeah.
I'm actually concerned about the Brian Hartline situation because
Mm-hmm.
there's a difference in being a position coach and a head coach. I was talking to some coaches about this. It's actually harder, they said, to make the transition from position coach to coordinator than it is necessarily from position coach to head coach, because
Yeah,
head
that's a
coach, you're
yeah.
CEOing the entire thing. But and Brian Hartline's obviously been a really good coach, done a great job with the
Mm-hmm.
wide receivers, knows offense in and out. But this is going to be his first time calling plays. And calling plays is not just about your offense, it's about the sequencing of plays. That's the thing that made Chip Kelly so outstanding, is particularly this year, even in the second time that they played Oregon, was that sequencing of plays, what you've
Yeah.
put on film versus what you think that they're going to adjust to, and then having another forward thought on top of that. And that's where the inexperience of Brian Hartline is, that like the first time you take a job, even if you turn out to be like Bill Belichick got fired from his first job.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he didn't have the type of talent that he had when he got to New England, but the reality is that there's still a learning curve for first time coordinators, first time head coaches, and that means that he's going to make some rookie mistakes at times. And Ohio State fans are just going to have to hope that it doesn't come in the biggest moments.
And you talk about the biggest moments. Their schedule shapes up really, really interesting because they start. I think it's game one where they play Texas. I can't remember exactly where the game is, but they got Texas, who's one of the national championship favorites for next season,
Yep.
right off the bat, game one. And you kind of mentioned the inexperience of Brian, and I talked about,
The other
hey,
game's
a lot of
in
people saying good things
Columbus, I think.
in Columbus. Okay, like a lot of people saying good things about Julian Sayin, but you got a first-time quarterback and a first-time offensive coordinator, and you play Texas. You just said it's at home, and that's certainly a
Yep.
great thing to have.
Yeah. Yes.
But
Yes, it is. August 30th.
that's tough right out of the gate with that first time combination, playing that type of team right out of the bat. And remember, this is also a team that's got Penn State on the schedule, who's really experienced and basically running
Yep.
everybody back. We know about Jim Knowles going over there as well. And they just have not been able to beat Michigan, and they got to go to Ann Arbor this season. So that
Oh,
first
hold on,
game, I
hold on.
think, is
And
going
can
to
we
go, is
not
going to
talk
be,
about that, the fact that they also have to go to Lake out there with Washington, and they're going to be
yeah.
improved,
Ooh,
and they got to go to Champaign as well, and both of those
yep.
teams are going to be very tough. Like those are
Yeah.
those are games that if you do not bring your A game, like that's where the Brian Hartline thing could show up,
Mm,
which is in those games, because you're not familiar calling defenses, plays against those defenses. Like, of course, you're familiar with the game plans and all of that stuff, but it's different when it's 3rd and 6, and you got to in the first quarter, and you actually got to set up a play that you're going to call in the fourth quarter when it matters the most, because you had to put this look out The way then in the fourth quarter, this play works.
Yeah, that's there's some interesting environments that you mentioned. Like, yeah, you get a night game out there in Seattle, and I think that's about around middle of the season. If Washington it has a really good start to the season, I'm sure you know from your playing days that place can get pretty rowdy and be one of the biggest environments in college football
Yep,
up there in the Pacific Northwest. So, and Illinois is going to be a really like when you talk about Penn State and their experience, Illinois is another team that brings almost everybody back on a team that went 10-3. So this is not the easiest schedule with the turnover that certainly happened in Columbus.
for sure. Now I want to move on to a team that is had a very good season this year under Curt Cignetti over at Indiana. I have no idea what we should expect out of Indiana next year. None. Because obviously they had a lot of transfers the previous year, and their recruiting up like hadn't supported being able to just play younger players up to that point. So they're still going to be heavily in the transfer portal for the next 2-3 years, probably, right?
Yeah.
And obviously last year favored them without having Penn State and Oregon on the schedule. But now I'm like, how what should we expect out of them for this year? Because Indiana fans got used to winning last year, but I don't think that they should set the bar at 10 wins like they did last year. Well, sorry, the bar
Yeah, if
wasn't
you're
even
asking.
set at 10 wins. I don't even think that they should expect 10 wins.
Yeah, I don't think we're going double digits because I think you got Penn State, Oregon on the schedule this year. The schedule certainly is a little bit meatier for the Hoosiers this season. And you kind of mentioned, and I when I talked about Indiana recently, I talked about this as before. At a place like Indiana, it's going to take like 2 or 3 years of like 9 to 10 wins for them to be able to recruit out of high school the way they want to and still maintain that level of success. That's why they dip into the transfer portal once again. I like their quarterback that they brought in, Fernando Mendoza over there from Cal. He was just one of 9 quarterbacks in Cal history to throw for 3,000 yards. He did that last season. I really like him. Roman Hemby is a running back that comes in from Maryland. A handful of years ago, he nearly had a 1,000-yard season over there. He's been a home run hitter from the running back position in the past, certainly as well. But they bring back 2 of their top receivers. Elijah Surratt was nearly a 1,000-yard guy. Omar Cooper, certainly as well in there. So I think this is still going to be a great offense. Mike Shanahan, their offensive coordinator, is coming back. Now, one big loss for IU is their co-OC and quarterbacks coach, Tino Sinceri. He was with this staff at James Madison, of course, was there at IU last season. He became the offensive coordinator at UCLA. I think that this is a pretty sizable loss
Yes.
within this offensive coaching staff. He'd been, it's really hard to retain really good coaches, assistant coaches in today's day and age. Everybody wants to go off and be, in this case, like a full-time coordinator or a head coach or something like that. So it's really hard to retain these types of guys. But I think Indiana is still going to be a pretty good team, but winning 10 games every year, I just don't think that's going to be Indiana. Where I see kind of IU fitting in is like 7 to 8 wins. Maybe you get up to a 9-10, and maybe you peak every like 3 to 4 years. And once
Yep.
again, it's all about the schedule
Yeah,
draw.
yeah,
That's
when
a
you get the
big
right
part
class
of this as
together.
well.
Yeah, when you get the right class together and some NFL guys so happen to be on your roster at the same time, then that's where you're going to have those moments. Now, how about USC? Because
Hmm.
there's a lot of excitement around USC right now with their recruiting, vying for the number one class next year. And obviously, they had some decommitments the previous year from the kids from Georgia. So people are wondering, are they going to stick? But what I've been hearing from the recruits themselves, Ted, is that USC has stepped it up recruiting. They have stepped it up, obviously in NIL, but it is the activation of the coaches that the players are like, yo, I've heard from 10 different coaches this week alone. And they are putting the full court press on people, which is a big deal. And it's like they're taking it more seriously. But I do think that the thing that's going to turn it for them is the results on the field. And if they don't have the results on the field, then that's going to be a problem in and of itself.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because it's all about rededicating their resources when it comes to recruiting to Southern California. Oregon has had a lot of success in California, in Southern California during this time, let's call it 10 to 15 years, that maybe USC hasn't been as prolific in recruiting. And one thing that's happened as well in Southern California, you've got SEU had SEC teams kind of coming into SoCal. I remember
Yep.
Bryce Young was a USC commitment. Alabama came in and swooped him away. There's been many other examples of SEC teams going into that area when USC,
Georgia
it was
too.
basically the SEC and Oregon kind of went into that area and had a lot of success. And Oregon over the past few years with Dan Lanning has had a lot of success in Southern California. I just don't all of a sudden think that all of a sudden you got a good general manager coming in there that all of a sudden that Dan Lanning and company is just going to bow out. These
No.
are going to be some big time battles. I think Oregon has a little bit of a head start both on the field and in recruiting with some of these connections. Like they've really formed a pipeline to modern day down there in Southern California, widely
Facts.
considered one of the best high schools in the country right now. So there's going to be, but I tell you what, between the Ducks and the Trojans, there are going to be some intense West Coast recruiting battles, but this is the formula for USC. They need
Yes.
to be able to recruit Southern California better than anybody.
Yep.
That's their
And
formula to
play
win.
some
That's how
and
it was
play some
around Pete
defense,
Carroll.
Ted. Play some defense.
Right.
And now granted with DeAnton Lynn, the other coaches that they brought
Mhm.
on staff, even last year bringing on Ince, like he's Lincoln Riley has clearly shown a pivot in philosophy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Of that defense actually matters. So, but the question is, this is actually one of the benefits of his contract, right? Is that people have not loved his contract and all of this stuff, but it's actually forced USC to exercise patience. It's forcing
Yeah.
other schools with these contracts to exercise patience and saying, you know what, we actually did hire the right guy. Let's tweak things instead of trying to replace the head man. Let's try to tweak the things inside and fix those because replacing the head man is not an option right now.
I know, yeah, that you're talking 80 to 90 million dollars in a
Yeah.
buyout right now for Lincoln Riley, but it's kind of crazy that we live in a world at a team that is head coached by Lincoln Riley, and I think I feel better about their defense going into 2025 than I do about their offense. It's crazy to think
Yeah,
about,
yeah, because
but
they got a question at quarterback.
they do. They do. I think that defense is going to continue to improve and be
I do too.
top half of the Big Ten at the very least. But you talk about offense and the quarterback situation. There's some people nationally that are giving Jaden Mayava a lot of credit, a lot of this and a lot of that. But I look at Jaden, and you've seen some good things out of him, but for when you see those good things, I see 2 pick sixes against Notre Dame at the end of the game that cost them the
Yes.
game. I see turnovers. Like that's the thing that really popped out to me when Jade Mayava took over from Miller Moss last season is you can kind of see some of the raw talent that he has, but when it comes to reading the defense and consistently making good decisions, I just didn't see that. And the thing about
Yes.
USC, their offensive line was a problem last
Yep.
season, right? Miller Moss took a lot of hits. He was starting to see ghosts a little bit, and that, of course, led to Mayava at the end of the season. But they lose 3 starters off the offensive line, and I would say they maybe have comparable replacements in from the transfers that they brought in. I wouldn't
Yeah, but
say they're
comparable's not
gigantic
gonna
upgrades as well.
comparable's not gonna be good enough.
No, it's not. You're right. Like that's I looked at it and I really studied the guys that they brought in, and I'm like, I think that this is it's a break even type of situation, maybe at best for the Trojans. They're really depending on their freshman last year, but left tackle Elijah Page to step up and be live up to that 4-star rating that he had coming out of high school. But here's the thing: they got a really good receiver combination with Jacoby
Yes.
Lane and
Oof.
Makai Lemon out there.
Yes.
Man, they just need some big boys, some Big Ten bodies up front on the offensive line. Otherwise, like we learned with USC, you can have all of the skill players. This is a perfect example. You have all the skill players and talent out on the outside because remember they had Zach Branch, Deuce Robinson, and a lot more guys. But if you can't protect the quarterback, it's not going to go well for you in the Big Ten.
That's right. Um, there's another team, Ted, that people are you are either so high on this team or you are, what do they call it, when you just don't care about something at all, when when you just have no feelings toward it. And that's Penn State, because
Mm.
everybody recognizes that Penn State is going to be a good football team, but there's been so much not specialness, if you will, in the most special moments, that there's a lot of wondering, okay, well, all right, yes, they're going to win. Yes, they're going to go to the playoff probably. And then what? If they don't get the matchups that they did early in the playoff, do they advance? Do they win 2 games? That's going to be the question, because I have not been a Drew Aller believer. And then it's weird because he does some things, like he'll make some throws, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yo, that's a guy. And then I'm watching the game, and I'm like, it's not a guy. Like, and so, and it felt like their offense this year was so much smoke and mirrors. Like they're
Yeah.
shifting all over the place. They're going fast. Like it felt too tricky for the talent that they have. And so I wonder if how much substance is actually to it, and if Drew Aller can take a leap that says I should be the surefire #1 pick, or I should surefire
Mhm.
be a top 5 NFL pick, then I think that creates a different ceiling for Penn State than it does if he's similar to what we saw this year.
Oh boy, this is an interesting one because I had them number one on my way too early Big Ten power rankings. And now we got a couple of months that kind of go by, and I look at their roster a little bit. I'm extremely excited about Aller coming back, Singleton and Allen in the
Yep.
backfield coming back tonight, Dennis Sutton at defensive end, and a lot of these other guys coming back. It reminds me a little bit of Michigan in 23 running it back to win a national title. 2024 Ohio State, when guys could have went to the NFL, running it back to win a national title. It reminds me of that. But then I kind of look at this team and I look at this roster a little bit, and there is still a glaring concern at wide receiver and the speed and the athleticism and the playmaking ability out there on the edge. They
Okay,
lost their
so
top two wide. Go ahead.
so
Yeah.
like here's my question, Ted, about that is it the wide receivers, is it the offense, or is it Aller?
Ah, boy, that's maybe a combination of everything. I think a lot of it is the wide receivers. I look to that Ohio State game. Now, Ohio State had some pretty damn good cover corners this
Yeah,
last year. Had some
for
pretty
sure.
good talent out there. But I just remember watching that game, and those receivers just could not get open. This is a Penn State team that I think over the last couple of years has really struggled at generating explosive plays. And you look at last year's team, Tyler Warren was a big part of that at tight end. That's when I was kind of looking over these last couple of months, and I remember some of these games. Remember that USC game where he went over like
Yeah,
200 yards and
was
had
17 for
multiple touchdowns?
244. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So, and but now they don't have that. Now they got a 5-star tight end that coming in that they really like, but you don't have that guy that you can consistently go to in Tyler
Yeah.
Warren that can break open a game. They're hoping that 2 transfer wide receivers coming in can be that. One of them is coming from the G5 and Devontae Ross from Troy, Kyron
I like
Hudson
him.
over from you. Yeah, he is. He's like, if they're going to be explosive, it's going to be Devontae Ross. He put over 200 yards on a Big Ten defense last year when Troy played at Iowa. Like, he's got, I think that's such a big pivot point for the Nittany Lions. He's got to be a guy to be explosive down the field. When I look at Michigan for 2025, I think that they could play a lot like 20 or of one for Penn State. I should say I got ahead of
Mm.
myself. They're going to look a lot like 2023 Michigan. I think that this is a team that is just going to look to bully you and run the ball right at you with those great backs with the offensive line. And I think they're going to take a little bit of pressure off of Drew Aller to really make plays, because I remember in the NFL draft leading up to JJ McCarthy, it's like, well, they didn't run the ball at all in the fourth quarter against Penn State in that game, or and all these things as well. They
Yeah.
didn't need to,
Yep.
because their O line was great, because the run game was great. But you
Yeah,
look
they
at
didn't throw the ball
JJ
one
and
time. They ran the ball like 36 straight times. It was crazy.
J, JJ was good when he needed to be good. Look at the Rose Bowl against Alabama when
Yep.
he made some clutch throws. Look at how he performed
See,
in victory
he was a
over Ohio
dude.
State and all that.
He was a dude who I was extremely skeptical about going into the draft because I was like, his
Mhm.
team don't even believe in him to throw the ball. Why should I? And then I got a chance to talk to the quarterback coach that he trained with, Taylor Kelly, before the draft.
Mhm.
And Taylor was like, gee, this dude, when you look at Michigan's practice film in their 2 minute, and he was like, they would let him sling it, he was
Yeah.
deadly. They just didn't let him do it in the games because that's not how they wanted to play football. But they knew they always had it in their back pocket that he could do it. And
Yeah,
that's
that's
counterintuitive to football people because you're like, if you got this, why would you do this? But it won a national championship, and Jim Harbaugh was actually right.
yeah.
Um, now, now, how about the Oregon Ducks? Because that's obviously my my alma mater,
Yep.
and their roster is great. I think people are completely sleeping on their quarterback situation with Dante Moore and Austin Novosad, because everything that I've heard from last year's practice is that they love that they were like, if Dylan Gabriel had gotten hurt in terms of talent, that Dante Moore is head, not even head and shoulders, but just phenomenal. Like, he's one of the best kids that I've ever seen that's a non-professional throwing the football. And the Austin Novosad kid, I'm surprised he actually is still there because I think he could be a starter at a lot of places
Yeah.
in college football. But outside of that question mark, I don't see any question marks on the team. Yes, they're a little bit young, but they are very talented.
There's some folks in the Duck fan base, I think, that are really leaning into, hey, maybe 2026 is when we can make a run. Don't wait.
No,
Don't wait.
don't
2025
sleep
is a
on 25.
2025 is a squad, let me tell you that. But I was kind of watching the press conferences from head coach Dan Lanning and the coordinators as well. Tosh Lapoy, the defensive coordinator, brought up an interesting point. He's like, well, this team lacks a lot of Oregon experience, but there's a lot of excitement with the youth. He was really talking about the defensive backs where they've been
Yep.
able to recruit a different type of defensive back, a longer
Yeah,
and
them
more
boys
athletic type
long,
of
boy. They
right. Like you got 6'5" Kingston Lopa possibly back there at safety next to Dylan Thieneman. Like they're bringing in a different style of player. This is really the year. We've heard top 5 class after top 5 class, top 5 class. Now it's time to really see what these
yep.
recruits are all about right now. And you talk about Dante Moore, and with a flick of the wrist, he can throw it 50, 60, whatever yards down the field. Personally, and you talked about what you thought with Dante, I think he could have the highest ceiling of, at the very least, the Lanning era. And I know Bo Nix, what he did in the NFL was great. You look at Dylan Gabriel. I think we knew what Dylan was going to be. Maybe not the biggest and baddest arm talent in the world, but Dante, I think, could really take it to a whole new level at the quarterback position. And then, of course, Evan Stewart is coming back on the outside. I think he could
Yep.
maybe have a Troy Franklin 2023-ish maybe type of season. We'll see. But I love, hey, we got a former Oregon tight end here, so we got to talk about Kenyon Sadiq,
Oh
right?
my
I'm
God.
a
He is
huge
the best
Kenyon Sadiq fan.
athlete on their roster. He's the
Yeah,
best athlete on their roster. He will probably be a first round NFL draft pick. Like, he reminds you of a guy that played when I was playing. Oh my gosh, why is his name escape me? Went to Maryland, played for the 49ers. First
Vernon
round
Davis.
pick. Huh?
Vernon Davis, right?
Yes. There we go.
Yes.
I don't know why, and that's funny because he's one of my friends. That's bad if he sees this. He's like,
Oh
George, what
boy.
the hell? What's wrong with you, bro? So he reminds me of Vernon Davis in terms of the freakish
Yeah.
athleticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's special. Now I wanted to hit the because one of these teams, Ted, I'm predicting one of these teams is going to be Indiana next year. Okay,
Hmm.
Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin. Yeah, one of those three. Or I'll
You got
give,
one of those two.
yes, they're one of those three, and maybe I'll throw in a side of Minnesota.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you threw Minnesota in there certainly at the end. If they get their quarterback answered, figured out, they got a good team coming back. Illinois is like the easy pick. But when Indiana, what was the record? Like 3-9 or 4-8 the
Yes.
year before they got a first year head coach. Like Illinois went 10-3 last year. So like that's like the easy pick. They're not a name brand, but I think what we're trying to say is, hey, which team is going to really jump up and make the college football playoff?
Yes.
Illinois is a great pick. They bring everybody back. All Brett Bielema does is develop talent. He is one of the best developers
Yes.
in the Big Ten Conference, going back to his days at Wisconsin. And then, of course, Illinois was at the bottom of the heap in the Big Ten when he
Yes.
took over, right? We're talking about Tim Beckman, followed by Lovie Smith. Like what he's done in a short period of time has been insane there. Like
And I'm
Illinois
excited about Luke
maybe has no,
Altmaier, man. I'm
yeah,
excited about Luke
Altmaier,
Altmaier because he got better.
Altmaier,
He got better last year. And you know that he's going to put together a competent defense. And he got mad at me a few years ago, Brett Bielema did, because I called him out on Twitter in his first season there. Remember when he criticized the players after one of their losses?
hmm,
I didn't like it because first of all, it's your first year. You know the roster ain't what you need it to be. You shouldn't be blaming the kids publicly. Everybody knows that you needed a better roster, but you're the coach. You're the multimillionaire coach. Your job is to develop the players. Don't throw them under the bus. Like let the bus run over you. Actually, the bus isn't even going to run over anybody in year one in
right?
in
Yeah.
champagne. So just let it go, be upset and understand internally that's the conversation that needs to be had, not publicly to the media.
Yeah, I think Brett certainly wanted to establish a standard, certain right off the bat, and he's certainly been able to level up year by year by year. Certainly, they've got a lot of returners on the O line. You mentioned the defense. Aaron Henry is a great defensive coordinator over there at Illinois, so that's certainly a team, and they've got a very favorable schedule as well. Schedule. That's such a
Yes.
big point in nowadays with those 9 conference games. Who your draws certainly are as well. You talk about Iowa. I love Iowa's transfer quarterback and Mark Gronowski. Just a flat out winner at South Dakota State.
Yep.
National championships at the FCS level for the Jackrabbits. Puts up good numbers. He's probably their best quarterback since like Nate Stanley in 2019. Now we're not setting a high bar here in Iowa City, but still, nonetheless, I still like they return a handful of starters on the O line. Although they lose a 1,500-yard back in Caleb Johnson, they got two really good backs, Kamari Moulton and Jazz Patterson. And as long as
Yes.
Phil Parker is that defensive coordinator, they're going to have a top 5 Big Ten defense over there, certainly as well. Now, I'll say this. You got to sell me on your Wisconsin vision right now as maybe a surprise team here.
Okay. So I believe in their head coach. And when
Mm-hmm.
you give a smart head coach some time to build a roster, and I do believe that you can put together something special. That's my belief there because I Luke Fickle's done a good job wherever he's gone. So it's hard for me to believe that it's just that the wheels are just going to keep falling off the train. That's the
That's
that's the part
I
that's
see.
hard for me to sit with is because I'm like I if I look at a coach, I look, okay, is he a smart coach? Does he have a history of success? And if that's the case, it's hard for me to land at a place where they're not going to at least have some sort of success. Even if it's not the college football playoff, it should look significantly better than it did last year. But then when you look at their schedule, they start out with Miami of Ohio, Middle Tennessee State. Then they got a tough trip down to Alabama. Alabama's going to be breaking in a young quarterback, regardless of whoever it is.
Yeah.
Um, so there are opportunities, but then their schedule is hard. Not that I
It's
pull it up in front of me
insane.
because they're at camp. I'm sorry, they're at Alabama, at Michigan, Ohio State, at Oregon. Damn. And they got Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Iowa. Ooh, yuck. Oh, who did the?
It's like
This feels like Florida's schedule last year.
Florida. Yeah, they are this year's Florida. And
Oh,
because of that, if they go sit, if they make a bowl game, he's coming back. Like that's the fact of the matter. Because I know
Yeah.
there's been some talk maybe thrown out there as Luke Fickle on the hot seat and all that certainly right now. So yeah, like I cannot see anything higher than 8-4. I just can't. But remember, this was a 5-win
Listen,
team
it's
last year.
hard to find. It's hard to find wins. Think. Okay, let's go. Let's go through it super quick. In terms of the possibility of a win, the likely possibility of a win. So you got Miami of Ohio, Middle Tennessee State, both possible wins, right? Then you got
Yes.
at Alabama, Maryland, possible win at Maryland. Then you got at Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, and Oregon, all in a row. It's going to be
Yeah,
hard to
that's
find
there's a
a
bye
win
week
over the.
in there's a bye week in there somewhere. I can't exactly
It's
remember
it's after the
where it
Maryland
was, but
game. It's after the Maryland game.
after Maryland.
Yeah, but then they
Okay,
play
so
Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, and Oregon 4 weeks in a row.
that's I can't. Here's the thing about that stretch is you kind of look at it in March. You'd be like, well, I look at that and I don't really see a victory in there, which is true. But just think about it in the context of a season where you got to play week after week after week. You got a month there where you're
Mm,
just taking. I mean, you might lose by 20 points to Oregon. You might lose by 27 points to Ohio State, and all of a sudden you're not building any confidence
yep.
in the middle of the season. And then that affects maybe what's happening in your 50-50 games against Indiana, against
Washington.
Illinois, against Minnesota, Washington at the end of the season. Like, I look at this Wisconsin team throughout the Fickle era. I think it was plain as day. Plain as day, the Phil Longo hire was an utter disaster. Like trying
Yes.
to play an wide open offense at Wisconsin, it just doesn't make any sense. Like when Michigan hired Rich Rodriguez, they tried to do spread offense. It doesn't fit the identity. It doesn't fit what this team, like Wisconsin now I'm talking about, what they can recruit to. What can Wisconsin recruit to? Big farm boys on the offensive line, and they can recruit and develop really good running backs. It's kind of crazy that during this Longo era, they're still recruiting four-star offensive linemen and they're still recruiting four-star running backs. And now they got a coordinator coming in Jeff Grimes. That's all about the physicality.
Yep.
He's all about running the football. So getting back to Badger football, I think is the first big step that is certainly needed for the Badgers right now. But, Billy Edwards coming in at quarterback. They got a great transfer tight end in Tanner Kojal from Ball State, who's more of a taller receiving, longer type of guy. So, yeah, this is going to be a team. How can they weather the storm during the middle of the year?
Yeah.
That's
If
going
they
to be
can
the
win
thing.
one of those games, one of them.
Iowa. Yeah, I think
Yes.
Iowa's at home this year, if I
Yeah.
remember
If
maybe
they yes,
correctly.
it
Yeah,
is. If
yeah,
they can get one of those games, that'll
yeah.
that'll be a victory.
Yeah, like if they can get Iowa in the middle of that as well, like
Yeah.
that is going to be imperative to
Yeah.
their success, So, and then those, like I said, those 50-50 games at the end of the season, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Washington, none of those are guaranteed when you
Nope.
kind of take a look at Wisconsin's roster.
Yep. Now I want to go to the teams that are more toward the bottom of the Big Ten.
Sure.
And so the teams that we haven't talked about yet: Rutgers, UCLA, Nebraska, Michigan State, Northwestern, Maryland, and Purdue. Out of those teams, which ones are you highest on? For me, it's probably Nebraska.
Yeah, out of that group, probably Nebraska. Here's the thing about the Huskers. They lost a lot on the defensive line.
Yes.
So that's a big question. They lost their Nash Hutmaker and Ty Robinson, and then some other guys went with Tony White over to Florida State and some other SEC schools as well. Like they got to figure things out on the defensive line. I think they're really depending on like Williams Winery. He transfers over from Missouri, a former five-star coming off the edge. Hopefully he can realize his talent over there at Nebraska. But this offense, like the combination of Dylan Raiola and their new offensive coordinator as well. Like they really, Dana Holgerson, name was escaping my mind there for a
Yeah.
minute. They
I
really
mean,
got to
he
hit. Like
he came
we
in
got
the
to see
middle of the
Dylan
season.
Raiola.
Yeah, him coming in
We
the
got to
middle
see.
of the season last year was an interesting situation as well. But I think there's going to be a
Crazy.
lot of pressure on Dylan Raiola, and
There is.
this is a kid that I've known for a long time. Because I have a quarterback in college football right now at UC
Mhm.
Davis, and it is going to be very interesting to see his maturation because this is something that I would tell his dad would tell his son, is that
Mhm.
the Patrick Mahomes cosplay's got to stop. He's
Oh
got
yeah.
to live in who he is and step into that. Because of course, Patrick Mahomes is your hero. He's tons of kids' hero. But like the exact haircut, the exact glasses, the number, like everything, like it's gotta become like everything from the walk, the talk. It feels like I'm watching Cool Runnings. Have you ever seen that movie?
I've seen Cool Runnings.
Yes.
Yes.
So you had the Jamaican bobsled team that was trying to learn how to do it, and they were following the Swiss. Really great,
Yep.
great people to follow. And then
Yep.
eventually they're like, hold up. The Swiss do some really good things, but we got to take what they doing and be who we are at the same time. And I think that that's going to be when Dylan Raiola takes the next biggest step.
Yeah, you got to figure out, I think, certainly a way. It doesn't help that Nebraska and Kansas City's Chiefs uniforms look very similar in the red, certainly as well. But yeah, you gotta see him take that big next step up forward. Now they bring in two really good transfer wide receivers, Dane Key from Kentucky, Isaiah Hunter is coming over from Cal right now. They bring back a running back, Emmett Johnson, in the backfield. They lost a couple of them to the portal, but bringing back Emmett Johnson, I think they're going to really try to fit him into a bell cow type of role back there in that backfield. This offensive line, it's been banged up the last couple of years. Before that, in the Scott Frost era, it just wasn't very good. And there were
Yep.
times last year where Dylan Raiola was getting hit a good amount. Offensive line, I feel like I say this every year for Nebraska. Offensive line has got to step up, and we got to start to see the because when Matt Rule got hired, it's like, yeah, we're going to get back to trench football. We're going to run
Yeah.
the ball. We're going to be physical. We're going to do all this Big Ten type of stuff. And I just haven't really seen it yet. In
Well,
2 years of
see,
Matt Rule, you
Ted,
see some.
I think it's harder than people think all the time to build a roster because when you look at the transfer portal, skill position players come a dime a dozen. That
Yeah.
like yes, there are some exceptionally special ones occasionally, like you had Jordan Addison leave Pitt and go to USC. Like occasionally
Mm-hmm.
you have a special type of guy hop in the portal in the skill position. But for the most part, they come a dime a dozen. There's a bunch of good wide receivers that come out every
Yeah.
year, bunch of good corners, safeties, all of that. It's the offensive line. You don't really see the top tier offensive linemen transfer. Yes, you'll have a Johnny Cornelius or
Mm-hmm.
the kid from Nevada this year or Incarnate Word. Like you might have one or two that like transfer up, but aside from that, your big time offensive and defensive linemen do not move.
No.
So that's the part that makes it hard is that you actually have to recruit those players and develop them into really good players rather than quick fixes in the portal because you may get good patches, but they're not going to put together, an exceptional offensive line out of the transfer portal. It's not happening.
There, yeah, there are certain positions, and offensive line is certainly one of them where you got where it's hard to grab really good players out of the portal. There's some people out there that believe, hey, bringing in more than one transfer on the offensive line maybe not be the best idea in the world. There's some other people that say no big deal, but those are just two different schools of thought right there. But I think for Nebraska, they know they're not going to be able to go out maybe and get the 5-star offensive lineman unless they're playing football in Omaha or Lincoln or something like that. So they got to really focus on the development. They got to make sure that they can take high 3 stars, low 4 stars in the heartland of America, and they can develop them into all Big Ten type of players like that. I mean, I grew up in the state of Wisconsin. That's what Wisconsin did. Yeah, there were a couple of really highly rated players that they got over the years, but it's a lot of guys that
Yep.
fit their system, fit their blocking scheme, fit everything that they wanted to do, and then establish that tradition and then develop them. And that's kind of what Nebraska certainly needs to do. The past couple of years, I've drank the Kool-Aid a little bit, and maybe it's because I've got Nebraska fatigue a little bit. But man, I look around and I'm like, I don't know. I'm not as confident entering this year about Nebraska. Maybe if Dylan takes a big step forward and he turns into the quarterback that we all think he can be, maybe he can carry them a little bit to some upset victories. But right now, I don't know how much of an improvement that we're going to see from Nebraska. We went 6-6 last year. Maybe they'll get to 7-5 or 8-4 or something like that. But beyond that, I'm not sure if I see Nebraska making like a 3 or 4 game jump this year.
Yeah, I think a team that can sneak up on some teams this year too that we didn't talk about yet is Michigan State, because Jonathan Smith is a builder. If you look at what he
Yep.
did over at Oregon State, that they were in a similar situation to what Michigan State is. And he's not a guy that's going to go out and try to pull every player out of the portal. He's going to recruit and build. And they have been extremely quiet. Extremely quiet. And when you look at their schedule next year, Western Michigan, Boston College, and Youngstown State in the preseason. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Regular season, no Ohio State, no Michigan, no Penn State. Oh no, sorry, they do have Penn
They
State.
got to play
No,
Michigan.
yeah, and you're like, hold up, no Oregon, no Ohio State on the schedule. Okay, huh? Now you now you got some shots around here. And if Aiden Childs can take the next step in his quarterback maturation, they're going to have a good shot to win some football games. To instead of what they finished last year, to be sitting in a much better spot instead of being at the very bottom of the Big 12 and finish well almost obviously Purdue was at the bottom and Maryland, but instead of being 5-7, they could be looking at a 7-5 or 8-4 record.
And they were close last year. I think there were some 50-50 games that did not go their way. So they could have made a bowl game. Which is exactly where you wanted to be in year one of Jonathan Smith. I think they wanted to be right at that. Hey, let's improve by a win or a couple of wins and really get this thing going in the right direction. But here's the thing. You mentioned builder, and in today's day and age, retainment. Retainment is the big word. Michigan State had the 3 least amount of departing transfers in the Big Ten Conference. That is how you start to build, when you can maintain some of these players and you stack classes and you stack guys that have been there for a year and 2 years and 3 years, and all of a sudden they understand what this culture is. Aiden Childs, you mentioned, he's got to protect the football, man, first of all. So he's coming back this year. Nick Marsh, their great freshman receiver from last year, he's coming back. They got Jack Velling, the tight end that was with them at Oregon State. He's coming back, and I'm a big believer in Joe Rossi, the defensive coordinator as well, who did some good things at Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm excited about this team, and I'm excited about being here with you, Big Ten Ted. So you guys will see us getting together some, and Ted, man, great going through the Big Ten with you today, man. Appreciate you coming on, and we will actually do some things that some of these college football teams are scared to do, which is home and homes, man. Appreciate it.
Let's do it. I love it. We completed the home and home. I love to see it. You came on my turf. I went on your turf. It was all good. Had some great conversations. So it's always great to talk to you.
Yep. All right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoy. Peace out. Catch you guys later.